All right, welcome to another episode of Black Swan Revelations. My name is Shane, and today we're going to be talking about the thief on the cross. So if you ever want to reference this video down the road, you can simply just remember it as the one about the thief. All right. How's everyone doing today? How's everyone doing? Let's just jump right into it. I'm going to start off in the Gospel of Luke. And I'm going to go a little bit Jordan Peterson on you a little bit. I'm a big fan of Jordan Peterson, and I've actually been to one of his lectures. And I was always amazed that someone can speak for like 4 hours and just have that energy. Like when we saw Jordan Peterson, it was my wife and my mom. 3 of us went, and it was in Edmonton. So obviously Jordan Peterson is an Albertan, like myself. We like to think deep. So let's jump into Luke chapter 22. Let's see what's going on here. Luke 22. I'm not going to read the entire chapter. We're going to start off where basically Jesus is praying on the Mount of Olives. So we're just going to go over here. Let's just go down to right here. Verse 39. So this is Luke 22, verse 39. And he came out and went as he was wont to the Mount of Olives, and his disciples also followed him. And when he was at the place, he said unto them, Pray that ye enter not into temptation. And he was withdrawn from them about a stone's cast, and kneeled down and prayed, saying, Father, if thou be willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done. And there appeared an angel unto him from heaven, strengthening him. strengthening him. And being in agony, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was as it were great drops of blood falling down to the ground. And when he rose up from prayer and was come to his disciples, he found them sleeping for sorrow. This is kind of interesting as well. They had so much sorrow from what Jesus had mentioned to them that one day in the future he's going to die. I don't think they fully appreciated that it was this night, but they were heavy. And if you've ever been to a funeral and you're preparing for a funeral, maybe you have close friends, like, it's exhausting. Funerals are exhausting because you're thinking about that person all day long. And even after you bury the person, you're thinking about them for a while. So it's exhausting. So here we see disciples very sleepy, and it's because they had sorrow in them. So this isn't just because they're tired. This is because of fatigue of what Jesus had mentioned to them. And said unto them, Why sleep ye? Rise and pray, lest ye enter into temptation. That's kind of interesting as well. And while he yet spake, behold, a multitude, and he that was called Judas, one of the 12, went before them and drew near unto Jesus to kiss him. But Jesus said unto him, Judas, betrayest thou the Son of Man with a kiss? When they which were about him saw what would follow, they said unto him, Lord, shall we smite with the sword? And one of them smote the servant of the high priest and cut off his right ear. And Jesus answered and said, Suffer ye thus far. And he touched his ear and healed him. And then Jesus said unto the chief priests and captains of the temple and elders which were come to him, Be ye come out as against a thief with swords and staves? So remember that. We'll come back to that. When I was daily with you in the temple, you stretched forth no hands against me, but this is your hour and the power of darkness. So this is your time. This is your hour. This is not talking about 60 minutes. This is your time to shine. Then took they him and led him and brought him to the high priest's house. This is all at night. And Peter followed afar off. And when they had kindled a fire in the midst of the hall, they were set down together. Peter sat down among them, but a certain maid beheld him as he sat by the fire and earnestly looked upon him and said, This man was also with him. And he denied him, saying, Woman, I know him not. And after a little while another saw him and said, Thou art also of them. And Peter said, Man, I am not. And about the space of 1 hour, after another confidently affirmed, saying, Of a truth, this fellow also was with him, for he is a Galilean. And Peter said, Man, I know not what thou sayest. And immediately while he yet spake, the cock crew. And the Lord turned and looked upon Peter. And Peter remembered the word of the Lord, how he had said unto him, Before the cock crow, thou shalt deny me thrice. And Peter went out and wept bitterly. And the men that held Jesus mocked him and smote him. And when they had blindfolded him, they struck him on the face and asked him, prophesying, Who is it that smote thee? Reminiscent of back in Jeremiah's day, where they would do the same treatment to Jeremiah and other prophets. They basically blindfolded them, or they would smack them and say, which way did that punch come from? Which direction? Mocking. And many others things, blasphemy spake they against him. And as soon as it was day, the elders of the people and the chief priests and the scribes came together and led him into their council, saying, Art thou Christ? Tell us. And he said unto them, If I tell you, ye will not believe. And if I also ask you, ye will not answer me, nor let me go. We'll talk about that. Hereafter shall the Son of Man sit on the right hand of the power of God. Then said they all, Art thou then the Son of God? And he said unto them, Ye say that I am. And they said, What need we any further witnesses? For we ourselves have heard of his own mouth. Chapter 23. And the whole multitude of them arose and led him to Pilate. And they began to accuse him, saying, We found this fellow perverting the nation and forbidding to give tribute to Caesar, saying that he himself is Christ a king. And we'll hang on to that. That's interesting right there. Give tribute to Caesar. Whoops. Lost it there. Whoa, slow down. What's going on here? Wow, that was crazy. Let's see here. Stirs up the people, teaching through all Jewry, which is all over Judea, beginning from Galilee to this place. When Pilate heard of Galilee, he asked whether the man were a Galilean. Hey, what happened? I skipped ahead. Oh, yeah, right here. Okay. Verse 22. And they began to accuse him, saying, We found this fellow perverting the nation and forbidding to give tribute to Caesar, saying he himself is Christ a king. And Pilate asked him, Art thou the king of the Jews? And he answered him, Thou sayest. Then said Pilate to the chief priests and to the people, I find no fault in this man. And they were the more fierce, saying, He stirreth up the people, teaching through all Jewry, beginning from Galilee to this place. When Pilate heard of Galilee, he asked whether the man were a Galilean. And as soon as he knew that he belonged unto Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him to Herod, who himself was at Jerusalem at that time. And when Herod saw Jesus, he was exceeding glad, for he was desirous to see of him a long season, because he had heard many things of him, and he had hoped to have seen some miracle done by him. Then he questioned with him many words, but he answered him nothing. And the chief priests and scribes stood and vehemently accused him. And Herod, with his men of war, set him at naught, and mocked him, and arrayed him in a gorgeous robe, and sent him again to Pilate. At the same day, Pilate and Herod were made friends together, for before they were at enmity between themselves. And Pilate, when he had called together the chief priests and the rulers and the people, said unto them, Ye have brought this man unto me as one that perverteth the people. Behold, I have examined him before you, and have found no fault in this man touching those things whereof ye accused him. Nor yet Herod, for I sent you to him, and lo, nothing worthy of death is done unto him. I will therefore chastise him and release him. For of necessity he must release one of them at the feast. And they cried out all at once, saying, Away with this man, and release unto us Barabbas, who for certain sedition made in the city, and for murder was cast into prison. So he is a murderer. And in the other Gospels, he's mentioned in the other Gospels as well, though lightly in the Gospel of John. But in the Gospel of Matthew and the Gospel of Mark, we also know that this guy was also a thief. He was known to steal things. Pilate, therefore, willing to release Jesus, spake again to them, but they cried, saying, Crucify him, crucify him. And he said unto them the third time, Why, what evil hath he done? I have found no cause of death in him. I will therefore chastise him and let him go. And they were instant with loud voices, oh, parched today, requiring that he might be crucified, and the voices of them and of the chief priests prevailed. And Pilate gave sentence that it should be as they required. And he released unto them that for sedition and murder was cast into prison, whom they had desired, but he delivered Jesus to their will. So they freed Barabbas. And as they led him away, they laid hold upon one Simon, a Cyrenian, coming out of the country. On him they laid the cross that he might bear it after Jesus. And there followed him a great company of people and of women, which also bewailed and lamented him. But Jesus turning unto them, saying, Daughters of Jerusalem, weep not for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For behold, the days are coming, in the which they say, Blessed are the barren and the wombs that never bear, the paps which never gave suck. Then shall they begin to say to the mountains, Fall on us, and to the hills, cover us. For if they do these things in a green tree, what shall be done in the dry? And there was also two other malefactors that led with him to be put to death. So two other malefactors. Remember, Barabbas had just been let go, but these two other malefactors, same category as Barabbas, are being led with him to be put to death. And when they were come to the place which is called Calvary, they were crucified with him and the malefactors, one on the right hand and the other on the left. Then said Jesus, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And they parted his raiment and cast lots, and the people stood beholding. And the rulers also with them derided, saying, He saved others, let him save himself. If he be the Christ, the chosen of God, if he be the Christ, the chosen of God. And the soldiers also mocked him, coming to him and offering him vinegar, and saying, If thou be the King of the Jews, save thyself. And a superscription was also written over him in the letters of Greek and Latin and Hebrew, This is the King of the Jews. And one of the malefactors which were hanged railed on him, saying, If thou be Christ, save thyself and us. But the other answering rebuked him, saying, Dost thou not fear God, seeing that thou art in the same condemnation? Does not fear God. That's interesting, right? And we indeed justly, for we receive the due reward for our deeds. But this man has done nothing amiss. And he said unto Jesus, Lord, and this is key because you'll only find this in the King James Bible. And he said unto Jesus, Lord, remember me when thou comest into thy kingdom. Where is he talking about? Oh, he's talking about heaven. Lord, remember me when thou comest into thy kingdom. After we die, remember me. And Jesus said unto him, Verily I say unto thee, today shalt thou be with me in paradise. We'll come back to that. So he wasn't talking about getting him off the cross. He was talking about, the thief knew that he was going to die on the cross. And he's saying to Jesus, look, after we die, remember me. Lord, remember me. And Jesus said unto him, Verily I say unto thee, today thou shalt be with me in paradise, speaking specifically to the thief on the cross. And it was about the 6th hour, and there was darkness over all the earth, and the sun was darkened, and the veil of the temple was rent. And when Jesus had cried with a loud voice, he said, Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit. And having said thus, he gave up the ghost. And now when the centurion saw what was done, he glorified God, saying, Certainly this was a righteous man. All right. Lots to cover here. All right, let's see what people are saying here. Let me go back. Let's see here. Starting to get used to live streams this often. That's funny. We collectively revolt if we don't keep getting them. That's funny. Thank you for that. Appreciate that. Hi, Mary. How you doing? It's interesting that the right ear was shot. Yeah, Trump's right ear. Yeah, for sure. Blessing everyone. Hello, Amber. Hello, Lisa. Michelle. End Times Talk is here. Welcome, brother. Welcome. All right, so what do we got going on here? Lots to unpack. And the reason why I wanted to read this story is because usually what happens is we read this story at Easter time. And I would encourage you to read this story of Jesus' crucifixion at least every once in a while. At least every once in a while. So we have Jesus praying in the Mount of Olives with his disciples. And he's asking them, could you not tarry with me for 1 hour? Could you not just stick around a little bit just for 1 hour and pray with me? So the temptation is kind of interesting because they were sleepy. And I often think about that. When you get sleepy, if you've ever been tired, driving down the highway, it is painful if you're tired. Especially if you're just driving out of town and you know you have another 12 hours to go and you're already tired. Fighting sleep is painful. It's painful. Going to sleep is easy and it feels so good when you're tired. It feels so good. I even used to play games when I was driving. I would go, you know what? I'm going to close my eyes for 5 seconds and then I'm going to open them. That way I can give myself a bit of a rest. So I close 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000. And then all of a sudden I'm in the ditch because I'd been asleep for like a minute or something. I don't know how long I was asleep, but that game doesn't work. That game doesn't work. So don't try this. Don't try. Just pull over. It's much safer to pull over. Don't play that game. Don't close your eyes and count because you will fall asleep. I used to play this game with my kids. If they were talking nonstop, kind of like their dad does on this channel, I would play the game. I'd play a game with my kids. I'd say, hey, you know what? Let's play this game. You guys close your eyes, and whoever closes their eyes the longest wins the game. So they would do it. And all three of my kids would be out cold, just like this, gone, right? Not saying that you should do that all the time, but it works. I tried it on my wife. I said, honey, why don't you try closing your eyes for a little bit? It's most likely the other way around. I hope she's not watching this show right now. The point is, sleep is easy. It's easy to fall asleep. It's easy. And what was Jesus saying? Like he said, pray that you don't enter into temptation. I think the temptation in this case was to, in times of duress and suffering, it's easier to close your eyes. It's easier to look the other way. It's easier to turn around and say, I didn't see anything. I didn't see this. And remember, they were sorry, not because of what Jesus was about to partake of, because they had no idea. They were sorry because of what Jesus could bring to the table for them. That's why they were sorry. It was almost like, when you pick someone on your team and you pick all these players and then all of a sudden you get down to the last guy and you think, man, this guy, I don't know, he's being picked last, but hopefully he does something. And then at the end of the game, like maybe he's playing a goalie and he ends up letting in 65 goals in hockey and he shatters all records for letting in the most goals. you would be sorry. Like, you'd be speechless at the end of the game. You're like, bro, I don't even have the words to say to you. You could have just lied down on your side and you could have blocked all these shots, but you did nothing. You left the net. Like, you're horrible. You're a horrible goalie. Like, as a good friend, you shouldn't be playing this game. That's sorry. That's sorrowful because you're disappointed. So imagine 12 disciples and one of them's missing. Not sure why he didn't show up with you guys. He left and never came back. And you're sorry because Jesus just finished saying that he's going to be killed one day in the future. The religious leaders are going to kill him one day. And in their heads, they're like, but I thought you're our king. I thought you were our king. I thought you're going to restore everything back to Israel. I thought that's why you're here. And now you're saying with conviction, because you haven't lied to us yet. You haven't lied to us, and you said you're going to be killed, and this is devastating to us. And because of that, their hearts were sorry and they got sleepy. Almost like it'd be easier not to go with this plan anymore and just fall asleep and just let this stuff just wash over us. Because, man, we've been getting up early in the morning. We've been staying up late at night. We just had a good supper as well. Like, we are so full right now. And the idea that this guy's, maybe we got it all wrong. Maybe we got him all wrong. Maybe this guy, maybe he's not the Messiah. Maybe he's not our leader. Maybe he's not our king. And just as they're thinking this, all of a sudden Judas shows up. And maybe some are thinking, well, maybe this guy can talk some sense into Jesus. And then they see a horde behind Judas carrying swords and sticks, staves, which is interesting. Because staves in the Old Testament were used to bear the ark. And now they're used to strike at the king of the universe when they were used to bear the ark. And these rebels, if you will, showed up, and Judas had an agreement. He said, whoever I kiss, that's the one that you're going to arrest. And he walked up to Jesus, leaned in to kiss him. This was probably a normal greeting, but as he's leaning in to kiss Jesus, Jesus is basically saying to him, you're betraying me with a kiss. And this goes all the way back to Psalms, where it was foretold what was going to happen, that the Messiah was going to be betrayed by one of his closest friends, not an enemy. An enemy anybody can handle. It's easier. Man, I can handle my enemies. I can't handle my friends betraying me. That's difficult. It's difficult to have your spouse stab you in the back. It's difficult for your spouse to have somebody stab him or her in the back. They don't expect that. But when it's outside, when it's your enemy, hey, this is not a surprise. You don't like me. Same thing on this channel. Like, I've had people say different things about me, call me all kinds of crazy names, whatever. I don't lose sleep of it if somebody calls me a Satanist, all this kind of stuff. Like, I've been called every name, liar. I don't take the word of God seriously. I'm a blasphemer, everything. And I'm like, I'm okay with that because I expect my enemies to say stuff like that. But if my wife called me a liar, that hurts. If my closest brother calls me a liar, that hurts. If my sister calls me a liar, if my children call me a liar, My pastor calls me a liar. That hurts more than your enemy. So when Judas, we always picture Judas as a guy that nobody likes. And you could build a strong case for that. You could build a case for it because he was known to dip into the cookie jar once too many times. But it wouldn't have been written in Psalms if it was his enemy. Instead, it was written like one of my closest friends betrayed me. So you have to think about that from that perspective, that Judas went out with the 12 in the same ministry. And that's how Jesus ended up getting betrayed. He got betrayed by his closest allies. So then one of the disciples, whom we know is Peter, says, shall I strike these guys? Shall I basically fight our way out of this? And he took a sword and he cut off a servant's ear. And Jesus picked up the ear, put it back on, and healed him. He says, no, this is not why we're here. You got to let this happen. You got to let this play out. Why? Because it's their hour. It's their time. So it's not 60 minutes. We're not talking about they had 60 minutes to put him on the cross. Some people, when they think of the Lord's Day, they go, oh, that's just a 24-hour period. Or that day. They always refer to one day for some reason. I don't know why. It's the same people that say, well, when Jesus is saying, this is your hour, he was saying 60 minutes. And it's not true. That's not what he was saying. He's saying this is the enemy's time to gloat right here, right now. So then they take him away. And in the other Gospels, we see that John actually let Peter in because he had connections to the temple or to the courtyard, if you will. And he was able to let Peter in. But what's interesting is his accent was giving him away. What do I mean by accent? He's from the northern region of Galilee, which is where Jesus grew up as well. And you can look at it from the perspective, like right now, you guys, for some strange reason, you guys think I have an accent. But what I got to tell you is, take off, hosers. I don't have an accent. You Americans have an accent. I don't. You do. You have a southern accent. And all of you sound like this all the time. We don't sound like that. We are proper. We are proper. I know we have an accent. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, guys. We also apologize quite a bit. Sorry about that. But you could tell us right away at the airport, there's a Canadian in town. You guys know that when we show up. Same thing when an American shows up in Alberta, I know it's an American. So the same thing's happening to Peter. He's from a region where he has an accent, and you can almost look at it from the perspective, if you are a Christian and you go to work right after the day that you get baptized, right after the day that you confess Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, work will treat you a different way the next day. Friday, you're partying with all your friends. Monday, they're looking at you like, are you Christian? Stay away from me. That never made sense to me why someone would put a cross to a Christian and go, "Ee, you're going to hit me over the head with the Bible?" It starts. Monday morning, they start. Why? Because your accent is different. You just can't tell. They can tell that you have a different accent. Why? Because they're cussing the Lord's name and you're saying, golly, gosh darn, heck, all these Christianese words. And they're like, are you a Bible thumper? Are you a religious freak? Where are you from, boy? It's like, we were just hanging out on Friday. What changed? Well, what changed is your heart changed. And now they see you as having an accent, and you're not part of the club anymore. Even if you pretend to be part of the club, you can go ahead and go out drinking with the best of them and not tell a soul that you gave your heart to Christ on a Sunday morning, and go and drink and see what happens. They will smell you. They will taste you. They will go, there's something different about you, and I can't put my fingers on it. What's different about you? And as you go to grab a drink, you're like, well, I gave my heart to Christ. And right away they're like, why are you here? Why are you hanging out with us sinners? Why are you here? And then that's when you realize, oh, I am not of this world anymore. I'm not of this world. No matter how hard you try, you're not going to fit in anymore. You're not. You're not going to fit in. They'll see you a mile away, how you carry yourself, how you conduct yourself. I remember one time I used to work on a TV series called Lonesome Dove. And I remember I was a stand-in for the sheriff, Paul Johansson. Great guy. And I was his double, his photo double, if you will. So they would come in, do all their scenes, and then they'd leave, and then I'd come in and mimic what he was doing, and then they'd set up all the cameras and all this kind of stuff. So I did this for a year. I was a stand-in for a year. I also got to shoot people and different things. So that was kind of fun. Another story. Anyways, we were just having a conversation about something, and he looks at me and he's like, are you Christian? And I'm like, yeah, why? He's like, oh, I just noticed that you don't swear. And I'm like, I didn't even think about that. I didn't even think about that back then. That's what separates you to some people, especially to Hollywood. If you're different than them, if you're anything different than them, like swearing, if you don't go out drinking, actually got asked out to go to a stripper club with Bret the Hitman Hart, who I was a huge fan of, and some colleagues, and they're like, hey, Shane, you want to go out to a strip club with us? And I'm like, go out to a strip club with the excellence of execution? Bret the Hitman Hart, who I idolize? I'm in. Sign me up. No, I didn't say that. I turned him down. I said, no, I got to go to church tomorrow. So bad, right? Such a dork. Not saying that I should have, but the way I presented it, it was almost like, oh man, I just wanted to hang out with you so bad, but I can't go to that club with you. I can't do it. There's no way I could do it in good faith, right? So it's just kind of funny because you separate yourself. And they see it a mile away. It's funny. So now you have Peter, his accent is giving him away. It's like, you're from that same region that Jesus is from, are you not? Nope, never knew the guy. Nope. Don't know what you're talking about. And then another guy says, or another lady, I'm pretty sure I saw you with him. Pretty sure. And then finally a third time, you know what? You were with him. In fact, your accent gives you away and all this kind of stuff, right? And he starts swearing. Why? So that he can blend in, and hopefully they would go, oh yeah, no, a person that hangs out with Jesus doesn't swear. So we got the wrong person. And then he looked, because the cock crew, and he looked, and Jesus turned his head and saw him. Just as the words are coming out of his mouth, I don't know him, mother heifer. Leave me alone. Just as Jesus makes eye contact with Peter. Telling you, man, I don't think Peter was the same after that. I don't think he was the same after that. So then Jesus, and again, this is all done at night. This is illegal. What was going on was illegal. The proper authorities weren't notified, nothing. This is all going on behind the scenes. And when Jesus was brought forth, they started smacking him around a little bit, put a blindfold on you. Who hit you? Like just mocking him like crazy. There are other sources that say that, and I think it's in Isaiah, where he actually had his beard plucked off. Like imagine having a full beard like Derek, the long-winded preacher from Bible Study with Derek. Imagine having a beard like his and somebody coming up to you, like even just feeling this is painful, just pinching, a little tiny pinch. Imagine somebody ripping your whiskers off and then smacking you in the head with a stave and then saying, who hit you? Prophesy who hit you. It's brutal, right? So then Jesus is presented before Pilate, and then Pilate says, what jurisdiction are you from? He's from Galilee. They send him to Galilee. Herod says, I don't find any fault. They bring him back. And then Pilate does something weird. He washes his hands and says, I'm innocent of this man's blood. Meaning, this is on you guys, as in, look, I don't care what you guys do, what you Jews do with each other. I honestly don't care. I'm only here for a short time. If it's within your rules and boundaries and all this stuff, you go kill him. Go stone him. And they're like, actually, under our own rules, we can't stone anyone under this kind of a thing. So we need you to execute him. And he's like, okay, fine. What's his charges? What are you charging him? One of the first things that they say is this guy does not pay taxes. Why did they say that? Well, it was most likely a while back when the Pharisees approached Jesus. They said, actually, they approached Peter and they said, does your master pay taxes? And Peter's like, of course he pays taxes. Why wouldn't he pay taxes? And then he goes back to the house where he was staying to go and collect tax money for these people. And when he gets to the doorway, before he walks in, Jesus walks in his way and blocks him in the entranceway. Doesn't let him in. Why? Because the other 11 disciples are in there. He's like, Peter, what are you doing? And Peter's like, well, they told me to pay our taxes. So I'm going to go gather money from the disciples and I'm going to pay our taxes. And Jesus is like, hey, let me just ask you a question here. The king's children, are they exempt from paying tribute? And he's like, yeah. Okay, well, you're exempt from paying taxes. But so that we don't offend anyone, I want you to go to the lake, and the first fish that you pull out, I want you to pull out a gold coin and pay my taxes and pay everyone else's taxes here. Yours plus theirs. Okay? Pay it. That way we'll take care of it and we don't offend anybody. But in reality, you're exempt from paying taxes, like in the realm of the kingdom. Why? Because we are the sons of God. We are joint heirs with Christ. So that's what he was communicating to Peter. So now you have someone that brought up a case for Jesus Christ saying, by the way, this guy said that he's not paying any taxes, which wasn't true. It was a lie. And he also said, this is one of the other charges, that he said that he would destroy our precious temple and in 3 days build it up. That's another thing that he said. And they lied about that because that's not what he meant. He was talking about his own body. After 3 days, he would rise from the dead. So they were accusing him of all kinds of stuff, lying to him at night, an illegal trial. Everything was going on, lying to him. And then Pilate washes his hands, says, no, I'm innocent of all this stuff. So you have to think, where did this come from? Well, one of the earliest renditions of this type of practice, washing your hands, was when the Levites would do this out in the middle of nowhere. So when the Levites would get their land assigned to them, their cities, they had like 48 cities, 6 refugee cities, cities of sanctuary cities, if you will, where murderers could go hang out until their trial, or people that were accused of murder were allowed to flee to, not murderers. If they were a true murderer, they weren't allowed to be in that city. They would actually have to get brought out so the family could take care of them. But if you're accused of murder accidentally, you're out in the middle of the woods swinging your hammer, and then the axe head falls off and kills someone, you're allowed to flee to these cities. But what's interesting is for every city, the Levites also had an area outside of the city, and they had to measure, I think it was like 1,000 cubits outwards, something like that. Can't remember exactly. But they had space outside the city that belonged to the Levites. Like that area belonged to that city. So what would happen is every once in a while, there would be somebody that they would come across that would be dead, just lying there, dead. And so then they would have to take a measuring rod or a measuring tape, maybe Stan Lee measuring tape, and they stretch it out and they go, okay, is he closer to this city or is he closer to this city? Which city is he closer to? Whichever city he's closest to, chances are he most likely came from that city, from that area, belonged to that area, because he's dead. Perhaps he left the city and somebody killed him, like some of the family members or whatever it is. So the rule was, if you are accused of murder and you flee to a city and you leave that city, that's on you. That's on your hands. That's your responsibility, because God said, stay in the city until you go to court or until the priest dies. When the priest dies, you are free to go. You're free to go because you've been accused wrongly and you're in this city. If you are a murderer, you're to be kicked out of the city so that the family members can take care of. But if you've been accused as a murderer, then you're welcome to stay in the city. But the deal is, don't leave the city, because there are people that are going after you, avengers of blood, if you will, to come after you, to take care of you, to kill you, to avenge their family members. But you're allowed to stay in the city. So what the Levites were doing was measuring which city did this guy come from, because then we can kind of get an idea of whose responsibility and all this, like where was he from. So if he's closest to city A, let's just say, for example, then what they would do is they would take a red heifer and they would put the ash in the water and they would wash their hands in the waters of separation. And they would say, we, God of heaven, we are not responsible for this man's death. Our conscience is clear because we don't know why he died here. We don't know where he came from, but we are innocent. We did not do this. So they washed their hands. That's the kind of the earliest rendition of where this tradition came from when it comes to people that are found out in the middle of nowhere. We're not talking about the ceremony of purification. Well, we're talking about the Levites would actually take water with them whenever they came across a dead body, and they would do this ritual so that they can actually remove the body. And they'd say, look, we have no idea how this guy got here. We have no idea how he died, but we didn't do this. Because imagine them bringing this person into the city and he happens to belong to a family member. They could say the Levites actually killed this guy without a trial. It would have been illegal. So the Levites are saying, no, we wash our hands of this. Now you get Pilate doing the same kind of a ritual as a Roman soldier, saying, I'm not responsible for this. So the religious priests would have understood what he was doing. Even if he wasn't a Jew, they would have got it, because if they're reading Leviticus, they would have understood, hey, that's our practice. We're not responsible for this person's death. And so what did the Levites do? Or what did the leaders do? They said, that's okay. Put it on us? No. They didn't do that. They didn't say put Jesus' blood on us. Instead, what they said is put Jesus' blood on our children, which was forbidden. Forbidden. How do we know this? Well, if you read in Jeremiah, God was telling people, I forbid you to say, when a man eats sour grapes, and his children's teeth will be set on edge. What are they saying? They're saying, whatever we do, we're not responsible for our sins. We are passing the buck onto our children. And God's like, what you're doing is wrong. Every man is going to be responsible for his sin. And is the Israelites, the leaders, got in an argument with Jeremiah, who was interceding on behalf of God, saying, God is not being fair. Because if there is a guy that is wicked his whole life, and all of a sudden stops being wicked and turns around and becomes good, he should be killed anyway. And God's like, what are you talking about? The guy's righteous now. He's not a criminal anymore. He changed his ways, and you're saying he deserves death. But yet, when someone is good their whole life and they become a criminal at the latter end of their life, you look the other way. And I'm saying, should that man not be punished? So if a guy is evil and turns good, let him go. If a guy is good and turns evil, he should be punished. But you guys have it backwards. You're telling me I am not a good God, then I am not being equal. And God's saying, you're not being equal. Your judgments are crazy. They're upside down. You're blaming everything you do onto your children. And this is an example. During Jesus' trial, they said, put this onto our children, not us. Not us. Passing the buck. So Pilate released them. And he said, in fact, what we're going to do is usually what our tradition is we're going to release one of you, one of your people. We're going to release. So he already said it twice. I want to release Jesus Christ. He's done nothing wrong. Herod said he's done nothing wrong. We have two witnesses that are higher ups. Myself, I don't see this guy doing anything wrong. Herod said the same thing. So you got two witnesses that say, I'm going to let this guy go. I'm going to release him. And the crowd almost went into a riot. So that's when Pilate washed his hands and said, okay, but I got to release someone. So they're like, release Barabbas to us. He's a malefactor. He's equal to the other two thieves on the cross. He's equal to them. Meaning they're all three are thieves. Jesus Christ is not a thief. How do we know this? Because Jesus said to people that were listening to him in one of his sermons, he said, look, I am the good shepherd. What does that mean? A good shepherd will stay and fight when a wolf comes in. A hireling, a person that is hired, will flee and leave those sheep. That's not me. I'm the good shepherd. There's all kinds of symbolism in here. Like, again, back to Leviticus. Every so often, they would take two rams, I believe they are. One of them they would slaughter, and the other one they would release into the wilderness with a strong man. They needed somebody strong to take this goat out into the wilderness, and they would release. That's atoning. That would be God forgiving them for that year for what they did. And basically, if you ever saw a goat wandering in the wilderness, you're going to kind of know what's going on here, because something had happened with this nation that they let this goat go. Same thing with birds. Like, have you ever wondered what was going on when the Levites would take two birds, and one of them, they would drown one bird, bring its neck off, drown it in water, and basically they would take the blood of that bird and sprinkle it all over this other bird. Can you imagine what he's thinking? Getting blood dipped all over him, and then they would release the bird again out into the wild. Why? Well, if you're approaching that nation and you see a bird in the branches, you're going to see that somebody committed something, and you're going to see this bird that has blood on it, and it's like a warning. Hey, look, somebody either has leprosy or something's going on in this area. Maybe we should stay away. So these, I'm pretty sure that when a person becomes gets free of leprosy, that or gets what do you call it, where they basically they get accused of being a leper, they have to stay without the camp. And I think this is one of those rituals that basically, if you see a bird with blood on it, you look around, you're like, okay, we're near lepers now, because look at that bird, he's got blood on him. And then with the sheep that gets led into the wilderness, that's an example of what Jesus Christ did for us. He replaced us on the cross, just like Barabbas. He replaced Barabbas on the cross. He was supposed to be on that cross. And Pilate let him go and instead put Jesus, an innocent man. Barabbas was tried and was guilty of murder, sedition, guilty of being a thief. He was guilty, and they let him go. Jesus was innocent, and they hung him on the cross. The most innocent man in the universe. I only can wonder what Barabbas would be thinking when he looked at the three people on the cross, the two thieves on either side of Jesus, and then Jesus himself in the middle. I can imagine Barabbas watching from afar going, he went to the cross, not me. He was innocent, I'm not. I don't know if he confessed or anything. I'm just saying that don't think that got into his kitchen, or that didn't get into his kitchen. So now you have Jesus on the cross, nailed to the cross, and then you have two malefactors on either side of him. And in Matthew and Mark, they say all that's written is these malefactors are hurling insults to Jesus. But in the Gospel of Luke, we see something a little bit more detailed, where one of the malefactors is yelling at Jesus saying, "Save us from this cross." And the other guy, the other thief, says, "Look, we're all in this same condemnation. Look at us. We're all on the cross. All of us. All three of us are here, and we deserve this. He does not deserve this. Lord, remember me when you get into your kingdom. Remember me, because we're sentenced to death right now. They're basically dead men already. Nobody gets down off the cross alive." So when you think about it, when the thief is saying to Jesus, "Lord, remember me when you get into your kingdom," that thief knows he's going to die. He's hours, he's minutes from dying. He didn't have time to get off the cross, go confess every sin that he's ever done. He never had time to ask for forgiveness. Nothing. He just said, "Remember me. Lord, remember me." And I think because of the legalities that these guys are dead already, they just haven't given up the ghost yet, but they're dead because they've been sentenced to death. Jesus has a legal right over them now. He has a legal right over the thief to say, "This day you'll be with me in paradise." Why? Because he's sentenced to death. He was able to have that conversation with them. These guys are going to die. They're going to get their legs broken. And Jesus is going to die on the cross as well. And I think from a legality point of view, he was able to look over at the thief and go, "Look, this day you're going to be with me in paradise. Now, some people will argue and they'll say, well, no, this is just this is a resting place. This isn't heaven. This isn't heaven. This is just, we go to sleep or whatever it is. Well, then you have to wrestle with what Paul was dealing with when he said, I know a man 14 years ago, whether in the body or out of the body, I don't know. God knows. And there was a man that went up to the third heaven, paradise. Says it twice. He says heaven, third heaven, and paradise. And he saw things that he wasn't allowed to talk about on earth, which is interesting. Because he's also the guy that revealed to us the mystery about the resurrection, as in anyone that dies in Christ goes to heaven. I believe that's paradise. When you die, you go to heaven. You don't stay in the ground. You're not sleeping in the ground. You get a new spiritual body and you're in heaven with Jesus Christ forever and ever. Amen. That's it. Look at that. That was about an hour. Pretty much an hour. So any questions or anything, just put it in caps. If there's something that maybe in relation to this story, if there's something that maybe you think I missed or something that you want to talk about briefly, we can do that. We got a couple minutes. Just put it in caps and then we can talk about it. If not, that's okay. I can close out as well. Let's see. Let me just go here. Let's see. Let's just go to some comments. Barabbas was an upstart that wanted to overthrow the Roman government. They thought he was like what they thought Christ would do at his coming. Yeah, I think so. I think the disciples thought that as well. Barabbas was in utter shock when he saw the masses calling for Jesus to be crucified in his stead. I believe he probably looked at Jesus standing next to him and Jesus with a big smile on. Yeah, I remember seeing that in The Passion by Mel Gibson. I remember when they showed Barabbas with the missing tooth and all this crazy stuff, looking at Jesus and whatever. So yeah, that's fair. I don't know. I wasn't there, but I think there's probably a chance, and maybe not, that he looked at life a little bit differently. Not saying that he had a salvation conversion kind of a thing, but I think you can't help but know that you are on your way to the cross to be crucified, and all of a sudden somebody else steps in and takes your place. I think you would have been probably pretty quiet about it because you don't want to get sent to the cross again. It's interesting, right? All right, let's see. Let's see here. I'm glad I'm not the only one. It's like the works is just frantic for the old days, and we know it's over. There's some warning. I think we don't want the past, but we know the works future. Now, let's see. What else do we have here? World, not works. Yes, for sure. Scapegoat. Yep, that's it. The scapegoat. What's this? Who's crying here? Let's see what's going on here. And as I thought I could burst into tears any moment, but no idea, except everything is overwhelming and I'm not, and I'm never caught up. What are we talking about here? Sometimes I feel like I'm midstream of someone having a conversation here, which is all right. It's all right. Let's see here. Just reading, trying to catch up here on some of the comments. Man, there's lots of good comments here. Oh, this is back to the accent. That's funny. I'm South US, so I definitely have an accent. God loves me as I am. True. My accent is weird. I only hear it when I record my voice. For sure. Let's see here. What else do we have here? Man, lots of comments. Wow. Yeah, I think A-Ban and myself, we don't have accents. I don't think my mom has an accent either. Us Canadians. All right, Preacher Joe, how you doing? That's it for today. Hope you got something out of it. The idea behind this as well is to cause you to perhaps think a little bit more about the crucifixion, how important it was that Jesus had to go to the cross, and why he did that, why he died for us. I think it's important as a Christian to reflect upon this whenever you can. Like if it's not every day, maybe it's once a week that you just think about this, I think that's why it's precious to go to church as well, because you never know what kind of a message you're going to get at church. And sometimes all of a sudden could be a message on the resurrection. It could be a message about the cross. It doesn't always have to be at Easter. Honestly, it doesn't have to be just at Easter time. But I think that's predominantly when we think about Christ and what he did for us is at Easter time. And I'm trying to get you to think outside of that, where we should be thankful every single day for what he did for us on the cross. And if you want a snapshot as to how thankful we should be, I think Romans would be a good place to start. Just reading the book of Romans takes you about an hour and a half to read. And just read it over and over a few times. And then all of a sudden, I'm telling you, the light will go on and you'll understand what Christ did for us on the cross. So that's it for today. Hope you guys have a fantastic day. Make sure and share this video with someone. Hope you share it. Talk about it during the week as well. What about that thief on the cross? What about Jesus Christ taking our place? That's something interesting. Thanks for watching. Appreciate you guys. Love you guys a lot. And I'll see you in another video. Bye for now.
Black Swan Revelations here on YouTube brought you today's mind-bending journey. Dive into the discussion, your comments, questions, prayer requests, and powerful testimonies of Jesus' love are what fuel this community. Did today's episode hit home? Smash that like button. New here? Subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a live stream or a video upload. Thanks for being part of today's adventure. Catch you in the next video, or maybe even in the clouds. Stay curious, stay blessed.
You knew I couldn't leave you. I had to say something else. Some of you left so early, but as you know, every once in a while I'll do this where I'll just jump back on just for a couple minutes, It's interesting when it comes to witnessing to people. It's an interesting subject. Maybe I'll talk about that in another video. I do witnessing a little bit different than other people. I do my witnessing a little bit differently than probably the majority of people. I've only seen maybe a handful of people do it this way. So what do? I spend more time on my knees praying and reading the Word of God behind closed doors, so that when I go out into public, I will know what to say via the Holy Spirit. Because even with this show, I didn't plan anything out, what I was going to talk about. I just knew I wanted to talk about the thief on the cross. Just create a little image, and I'm like, okay, that might be kind of interesting. Had a sandwich, and then about 5 minutes before, like when you see me with the music playing before the video, some people get mad and they're like, hey, how come you don't just start off right away? Why do you have the music for like 5 minutes? Well, that's when I'm actually praying and thinking about, what I want people to get out of this video. I'll do that just for like 2 minutes, and I'll just stare at the image. I'll be like, what do I think Barabbas is thinking at the moment when Jesus is actually being nailed to the cross? What was he thinking? And then I'll just think, what would it have been like on the cross, being nailed to the cross? Like, what would that feel like, getting a nail in your feet, all that? I'll just spend a couple minutes, and then when I take away the image, I'm ready to go. I'll just spend a couple minutes doing that. So that's how I prepare, so that when I'm out, like for example, we were in a soap store. My wife likes to go and check out candles and all kinds of stuff. And we were inside, and there was this couple that brought a puppy into the store. And it just happened to be a Dachshund, a wiener dog. And we just put our wiener dog down maybe a couple months ago now. So still feeling sad every once in a while. And I remember looking at this little wiener dog, and I'm like, hey, can I pet him? And the guy's like, sure. And what's interesting, what we talked about, see, you never know what a person's going to say. This couple had an accent. I'm like, oh, where are you guys from? They're like, we're from England, Great Britain, England. And they just landed, and the dog was a little bit shell-shocked, if you will, from being under the plane from England to Canada. So they didn't want to, they felt like they shouldn't leave it. And they felt like, we're not going to leave our dog alone because he's still in a little bit of shock from the plane ride. So I'm like, oh yeah, I get it. Can I pet your dog? And reach down, and every time I touched the dog, he would get a shock. Couldn't believe it. I was just like, oh man, I'm trying to be so nice to the dog, and the dog just wanted to be petted. And I'm like, okay, I'm not moving. And I go up and I touch the dog, and he'd get a shock again. And this would happen like 3 or 4 times in a row. And the guy's like, I've never seen that before. And he's like, what's going on? And then I think what was going on is because the dog was so low to the ground or whatever, like when he's walking with his paws, that he was generating static electricity. So when I touched his nose, he'd get a little tiny shock. And it was kind of funny, right? Kind of cute. But we got to talking. I'm like, oh man, so are you just visiting, or what are you guys doing? And they're like, well, we actually are moving here, but we're going to just see in the sites for a couple weeks and all this stuff. And I'm like, oh man, when you're done looking at all the tourist places and all that kind of stuff, why don't you pop by our church? We're just over in Royal Oak. Go check us out. If you come in, I'll introduce you to some friends, and you can get the lay of the land and all this kind of stuff. I don't care if they're Christian, non-Christian, whatever. I just invited them to the church, and I said, you can look us up. We're online. There's a YouTube channel, all this stuff. Just remember Royal Oak. No pressure on them whatsoever. And they're like, you know what? We might do that because they wanted to travel around outside of Calgary and all this kind of stuff. And I didn't feel it was right to say, hey, tonight come to our church, tonight. But I just planted the seed. It's like, there you go, you know. And they weren't opposed to it at all, which is kind of cool, right? Kind of interesting. So I think that's how witnessing has to happen, where you plant the seed and then another person comes and waters it. Or you could be the person that's watering it because someone else planted a seed, but you don't know when or where. That's the problem. It might be when you're pulling in to get your oil changed. It could be when you're going to see your doctor. I remember going to my doctor, and I was getting a physical, and he's like, so tell me, brand new doctor. He's like, okay, tell me a little bit about yourself so I can put it all into the database here. And he's asking me questions. He's like, so what's your favorite hobby? I'm like, thinking, what is the one thing that I do the most as a hobby in my day? I said, I read the Bible. I read the Bible an awful lot. And he's like, almost like he's trying to figure out, how do I enter that into this database? Starts typing it, and then he looks up at me. He's like, can I ask you a question? I said, sure. He's like, are you a Christian? I said, I am. Absolutely. He's like, so am I. And we shook hands and we just smiled. Nice to meet you, brother. It was so funny, right? But that's the only thing that I could think of. I was like, I read the Bible a lot. That's what I do. It wasn't, if it was 15 years ago, I could say, oh, I used to lift weights, or I go for running, or I play squash, or whatever. But the first thing that popped into my head is I read the Bible as a hobby. And he started punching that in, and then he stops. He's like, can I ask you a question? I thought that was kind of funny. But that's how I do it. I try to live my life like how you see me here is how you see me out there. It doesn't matter if they're a Christian or not a Christian. It really doesn't. I just, based on the questions that they ask me, I can tie it into the Old Testament, the New Testament, whatever conversation we have, I could bring it home. So anyways, thanks for watching. Appreciate you guys. I'll see you guys in another video. Bye for now. Take it easy.